Okay, y'all. Huh. All right, so when I looked up this morning, I was telling my story and I was telling you about all these different things that were happening to me. And then earlier, I'm going to tell you something. Earlier, I was looking at TikTok and this guy comes on. And he's saying something like he's getting bullied at school because he's African. And I started thinking to myself, everybody was putting like these different replies, and these replies was like, tell you, one of the replies was like, wait till you get older and you get them grades, and wait till this and wait till that. And they were telling him all this dumb stuff. Quite frankly. Hold on a sec. Whew. Yeah, I should have brought my notes. So then he was saying that he was getting bullied in school because he's African and he didn't know what to do about the bullies. So all these people were in the comments telling him like, wait till them grades come in, or wait till you older, and this and that, and all this dumb stuff. You know what I mean? Like really dumb stuff that you tell people when they're getting bullied and they don't fight. No, I got some stories. And I was thinking to myself, oh, and that's kind of why I had a thought process like, I need to come on and talk, because that shit is dumb. They were telling him everything but to fight the bully. For the first, like, I'm going to say about 15 comments, because I didn't go reading through all the comments. But I was like, no, dude, you need to fight. You need to fight, and you need to fight, and it shouldn't matter whether you win or lose, but fight. Because I know what it's like. Pour my tea. I know what it's like to be, okay, so when I was in school, I used to fight all the time. All the time. Like I said, when I was growing up, because I'm continuing this story. When I was growing up, I didn't know I was getting, I didn't know someone had put a hex on me. So because I didn't know somebody was putting hex on me, I was going through things that people who go through hexes go through. When, for instance, people start hating, things start happening to you, and you're getting into a lot of trouble and you don't know why. And so that was what was happening to me. I was getting into issues with people and I didn't know why. And people would want to like fight me. Now, I'm like, as an adult, I'm about 5'2", and I was 5'1" for a bunch of my adulthood. I just got to 5'2" somewhere in my 30s. And so I was like this shorter, I was kind of short. I've always been like a thin person. I was never like a fat person. And so it was like, why does he want to fight me? And dudes used to try to fight me. And I used to fight dudes. So I used to get into confrontations and stuff all the time. And I got kicked out of like 3 or 4 different schools, literally, for fighting and confrontations. About 4 different schools I got kicked out of, where my mom finally just took me out of the regular school. I didn't have to go to like CLC, one of those schools where it was like alternative with people who was bad or whatever. I ended up going to the school where people had to have high TOS scores, because I was always smart. And I knew it was smart. I had honors classes, but for some reason I was in honors classes, but I was still getting into trouble, getting into issues. Anyway, When I was in school and I was fighting, I have no issues. You understand? Like, people wouldn't bother me. I have no problems. People will not bother me. But when I became an adult and I started getting trouble issues with SRA when it was witchcraft, for the first, I'm gonna say about it was almost 20 years. I didn't even know what was happening to me, and so I was not allowed to fight. And do you know, when I found out what it was like to be bullied, now I don't know what the fuck them people was thinking when we was in school. I'm like, I used to be this, I used to take up for my friends. Like when they couldn't fight, then I used to like get in people's face for them, things like that. Now I'm so discombobulated. I don't know how they make it in the world. How did they live every day and not want to unalive themselves? I don't understand that. Now that I know what it's like to be bullied by a bully, and then people who do SRA, they do witchcraft, they some of the punkest, dumbest, most evil, and people you could imagine. But they get power, and it's occult power. So they do really atrocious, nasty things, because it's not in people's faces, it's in people's psychology. And so now that I know what it's like to be bullied by somebody, oh my God. I don't know how y'all do it. Anybody who's on here who has ever been bullied in school, or who's ever been bullied in their life and they didn't stand up and fight, and they could, because I know what it's like to not be able to and not know what was happening to me. But now I know what the people who did it was like. How do y'all live and not want to unalive yourself? How do you do that? How is it possible that you want to get up every day and do shit? How is that possible? What makes you want to be you? Because I don't understand you. I don't understand you. I'm going to tell you, I don't understand you. When I used to see my friends and they used to be so scared, some of them, like, one of them married to a doctor. And she was real tall. She was like 6 foot, She was really tall when we were in school. So this girl was like 6 feet in school. But she was really skinny. She probably a model by now, and she looked like she married to a doctor. But I'm like, how did she make it through school and not want to unalive herself? Like, really? But, like, I see some people, and they used to be punks in school, or they used to, like, get bullied in school. And they, like, in the world doing stuff. And I used to, like, I used to fight and all of that, and then I ended up attacked by a witchcraft. And I'm going to tell you, even though I know that they did things to me, like I had financial issues, even though I know that they caused so many problems in my life, because I know what it's like to be bullied now, and especially as an adult, I don't regret fighting ever. And I still wonder about people, like, how do they make it through the day if they don't stand up for themselves, if they don't fight about it? How do you make it through the day? Like, how do you want to live? Because now that I've had to deal with being bullied, I don't know how people want to live. And, like, I've survived being attacked by witches. I have survived it. And there were times in this survival that I literally walked around and wondered, why do I want to survive? What is it that I want to survive for? If I have to live with what they've done to me. It's like, has anybody ever watched the Woman King? And they talk about how she was captured. And then when she was captured, she was like, they raped her. Oh, excuse me. I'm in these TikTok streets. She was saying they raped her until there was nothing left. That's what it's like to be attacked by witches. It's like they'll take until there's nothing left. until you think you don't have anything left they can take, and then they'll start seeming like they'll try to find something new. And after that experience, who wants to survive? I was thinking to myself, why do I want to survive? Because if I survive, then I got to walk around and know that people did some of the things they did to me. So I would advise anybody, when I look around at other people's lives and my own life and everything, if you're getting bullied or if you got a kid bullied in school, that's going to matter more than everything if you fight about it. If you want them people that didn't have them problems, then that's not you. But y'all know there's some people with them kind of problems that's walking around the earth right now. That's going to matter more than your grades. That's going to matter more than anything on this earth, is if somebody was able to bully you. Trust me, I know now. I didn't know at first. I used to listen to people give advice like, go tell the teacher. And I didn't care. I used to fight anyway. But, you know, people used to say, go tell the teacher and all that kind of stuff. I know now why a bunch of them brown parents used to tell their kids, you better go back and fight. Because I know that when you are getting bullied, that encourages the most punkish, the most dumbest, the most evil, vile people to attack you. If they see you getting bullied and they see that you're not fighting back or you don't have a means of ways to protect yourself, it attracts the worst people to also do things to you. So I would advise anyone, it's going to matter more to you if you fought than it will if you made them grades. It's going to matter more to you if you fought, if you have friends. All them friends in school, none of them friends going to matter like that unless you kept them friends through thick and thin your whole life. Most of them you won't even see. If you're moving around after high school, you might see some of them, but if you're really moving around after high school, you may not even see them no more. But if you don't fight, that's going to be like the worst thing you're going to ever feel in your life, is to have to walk around and know somebody did some of the things that some of those people will do to you. And that's what it's like with witchcraft, back to our subject and stuff. And then today I wanted to discuss bereshit. Now the only thing about this is I didn't do my visual representations, because when I used to do this on YouTube, I had a bunch of visual representations. I used to put up the screen, and then I would go line by line on the screen, and I would tell everybody, you know, what I was talking about and show them as I was speaking about it. But now, my visual representations, and I hope y'all can hear me, because I don't know if y'all can hear me, but now I don't have those visual representations set up at the moment. But then too, like, even though I used to fight, I kid you not, I have a picture in my school yearbook because I got into a fight on the second day of school. And it was a girl on the yearbook staff taking pictures in the class, and she happened to take a picture of me fighting somebody, and that's in our yearbook. And when I was in school, you know, I used to get into confrontations like that. When I started being attacked by witchcraft, they used to say, you a punk, you a coward. And let me tell you what happened to me. The woman who attacked me, they rich. And her husband is beige, you know. And they rich. And he's a celebrity. So, you know how I'm me, and I be perceiving prophecy and things like that. And greater consciousness, like when I call the greater consciousness, I'm saying the stars, the earth, things that are over earth. There's an over earth and there's an under earth. And most people know that, some people know there's an under earth, but hardly anybody these days know there's an over earth. And the under earth people do terrible things to try to convince you that there is no over earth, because they want to believe that they're the most powerful, and they want to believe that somehow doing all the atrocious shit they did, that they'll somehow be forgiven one day. And so No, no, boo boo. There is an over earth and an under earth. So back to my story. Um, y'all know what to this shirt. I don't know what it is about this shirt. Um, so when, yeah, I have that picture in the yearbook of fighting, but when this lady, okay, so she does a destiny swap on me because she's punk, like she's a punk. But her husband does something that people, it's like it's a risky job. It's a job where people take a lot of risk. You know what I mean? And she wanted to be seen as a tough individual, and he wanted her to be seen as a tough individual. So what they did was they destiny swapped me. And then suddenly people started calling me a punk or a coward or treating me like a punk or a coward. Meanwhile, he was suddenly calling her strong, saying she's so strong, she's stronger than him, and all this kind of stupid shit. And she is like one of the worst, like I can see spiritual natures, and she is a punk. Like, so anyway, so suddenly that's what was happening to me. And so now I know what it's like, you know, for someone to do that. In like when I was around my friends, they all knew I used to fight because that was a lot of my reputation, because I was getting into confrontations all the time. So I had this reputation for fighting. And if you ask like my friends and my folks, all of that, that's a lot of what I used to do when I was in school, because people used to you know, like I was a nice person, but like it was like, but don't mess with me. You know what I mean? So if anybody, I was being hexed, and I didn't know I was being hexed. So people used to like try to mess with me and get in my face. A bunch of people didn't really used to mess with me too much because they didn't want to fight me. But the people who did, they had to fight me. And so now, you know, it's very different. And then I remember like having to fight some of the toughest people in school. Whenever I used to get into it, I used to fight boys. And so, and I used to see this being. When I was younger, it was a being around me that used to make people tell the truth, and he used to be around whenever I used to get into confrontations. And they used to kind of tell me that they were making sure that I could stand up for myself. And, you know, I didn't used to think much about it because, you know, I was a kid. I didn't know how to process guidance. I didn't know how to process things that were overworld or phenomenon and things like that. But I used to be able to perceive those beings. And they used to tell me that they were making sure that I was capable of taking care and of standing up for myself. So fine. I was like, okay, that's great. But becoming an adult and being called a punk by a witch who is like sodomizing and destiny swapping me while they're doing things to children and doing things to people through the occultic. That's a whole nother level of of evil and of attack and of bullying. So they made sure that I could take up for myself in school. But becoming an adult, they didn't make sure that I could do that as an adult. Those things I had to learn on my own. And now that I'm an adult, and some of the things that a person would have to do is like candles, fasting. Those are all the things that they attack. And so I've noticed all the things that they attack are the things I really need to do. Like financially, they'll do stuff financially because they don't want me to have materials for things. Or, you know, the fasting. If somebody does sexual sodomy on you, that feels worse than actual rape. I remember when somebody tried to rape me in my early 20s, I fought him for 2.5 hours. Like that's how I had gotten to where a man tried to rape me when this was in 1999. Okay? 1999, I was living on my own, and my friend at work, her boyfriend was crazy. And she used to tell me, he crazy, but she used to kind of halfway laugh with it, so I didn't used to think much of it. And then one day, he showed up in my apartment, and he, like, I opened the door for him because I knew who he was, but he shoved my door and he tried to rape me. And do you know I fought that dude for 2.5 hours? I literally went toe to toe with a whole dude who was an adult for 2.5 hours. And at the end of them 2.5 hours, I will say he did not rape me. Okay, he didn't get to rape me, but I fought him toe to toe for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Now that I think about it, and it's, I did a report about it and everything in a rape kit or whatever, but I had a whole fight like that. When I became an adult and someone did that hex on me, what was crazy about that was that the person who did the hex and the person who does witchcraft literally projected herself saying, he couldn't rape you, but she said he couldn't rape me, but she could. You know what I mean? That's what I heard. He can't rape you, but I can. And then I felt the worst kind of sexual sodomy, like a evil person, like the devil himself was raping me. I don't even know how I survived, because that shit happened literally for an entire 3 weeks. Someone was raping me. And so I don't know how I survived that. I don't know how I survived. I don't know how I ate. I don't know how I slept. I had my son was in the house going to school and doing things. I don't even know how I survived something like that. But I went from, being the person who would fight boys in school, having a reputation for that, until sudden, and then even fighting off a rapist when I think I was 22 years old in 1999 or something like that. I fought off a rapist, like hand-to-hand combat, like really, to someone raping me like that. That's what witchcraft would do to somebody when they attack people. They be putting people on the street. Some people get attacked by witchcraft. I went homeless. I was homeless for years. I think I was homeless for like 5 years or something like that. Because like I just could not get it together, and I was experiencing so many attacks. Well, let me tell you what this person does too. So this guy who was standing at the crossroad who did that curse, he was standing at the crossroad with his girlfriend, and she was a punk. She's like very punkish, but she wanted to appear strong. So they were destiny swapping. So let me tell you what she does too, what she did too. She goes to the Charlotte police. Like, they talk to the police department. I don't know whether this was the FBI or the Charlotte Police Department. I don't know who this was. But it was some sort of police, department. Because then I started talking about them and what they had done to me. And she tells them this whole story about how she's so afraid that I might do something to her children, and I'm some sort of crazy person because I was telling them the stuff that she's doing. So they showed me, like I said, I'm a prophet, so I perceive a whole bunch of things in consciousness, and I perceive, what she does. She talks to the police, and she puts on this whole sob story, and she talks about, she's all in front of the police like, she's so afraid for her children, and this crazy person might come up and do something to her children. You know what I mean? Because like I'm very angry, and they were attacking my son, and they were attacking me. So then like now, and for a while after she does that, and really it started immediately after she did that, he starts trying to tell me I need to go and confront them. They did a whole bunch of stuff to me first, satanically, like through witchcraft. And then they go talk to the police, say they're afraid for their children, and starts trying to say that I'm some sort of crazy lady or whatever, to the police. Although, you know what I mean, they're doing, like when they attack through the satanic, it is the nastiest, most hateful, evil stuff you could imagine. They literally project themselves having intercourse with minors, because they're trying to destiny swap it. So when somebody destiny swap you, they'll like have intercourse with a minor and then they'll try to force you to feel some part of it or at least see it because they're trying to make your life miserable so they don't feel anything from it. So immediately after she says this kind of thing, he starts going through the extreme of trying to get me to go and confront him. That's his whole thing, is you need to go and, I like saying that I need to go and confront him. Now this is a rich dude, a celebrity. He got security guards around him. Okay? And then I lived in North Carolina. Okay? I don't know if any of you has ever been brown and lived in North or South Carolina, but if you've ever been a brown person and you lived in North Carolina, I'm going to tell you that story about, I'm going to tell you what that's like. If you ever heard that story of that woman, she spent the night, it was one brown lady. She spent the night with like 6 or 7 beige women. And they were all in a house. They was all spending the night on this lady's house. And 3 of the lady's husbands was policemen. And they got a picture of them in the middle of the night with, they all had on their pajamas. They're all sitting on the couch. They all look relaxed, okay? The next morning, they found that one brown lady in the pool dead. And she had half her clothes was taken off. Like somebody was trying to change her clothes. And in the pool or something. Like maybe they were trying to take something off because it had blood on it or something like that. That's what it's like to be. And then let me tell you what happened. They did the investigation the next morning. None of the beige ladies said they knew what happened to her. They were all like, they were so clueless. They have no idea what happened to her. Okay? And then they let one of those beige ladies go to get the policeman breakfast while they were doing the investigation. Why would one of the women in the house even go, if the police wanted breakfast, they could have went and got that themselves. They could have dispatched another police officer to the scene and had him bring them breakfast. But no, they let one of those women whose husband was a police officer go get them breakfast in the middle of the investigation the next morning. And then after all is said and done, well, after all about this case so far, they're saying they don't know what happened. They're clueless. They don't know what the fuck happened. One brown lady in the whole house, she turns up dead the next day in the pool with half her clothes off. And this was in South Carolina, and they don't know what happened. And then they say while she was there spending the night with that lady the night before, she confronted one of those ladies and said her husband was inappropriate with her. Now, I know a little bit about something. Now, I don't have any races against beige people, don't get me wrong. And them beige Satanists, they lie to everybody. And at the end of the day, when we brown, what I do know is we got to fight the brown too, because the brown Satanists do you so dirty. Like, if I didn't know some of the things I knew, I would hate brown people. I would hate brown people too. Like, so I am not racist, trust me, because I know some brown Satanists do some evil stuff and some beige Satanists do some evil stuff. But that's what it's like to live in North and South Carolina. Okay? She turned up dead in the pool. Somehow, none of the beige people know what happened to her. One of the beige ladies whose husband was one of the police officers goes to get everybody breakfast unnecessarily. And the case is just seen as an unsolved mystery. So now it circulates on the unsolved mystery channels. So you and I both know what complete crazy dumbass shit that is for anyone to be able to, for that to happen, and that all those beige people lying, all of them lying, okay? And so, and I know what it's like to deal with a beige woman, you know. And let me tell you something, and this is nothing against all beige women, but this is a real thing that happens. Some of y'all, when y'all beige, y'all like us with, you know, this tone. Y'all real cool with us. Y'all love us. We real cool. Y'all are great to us and we great, you know. But then when one of y'all boyfriends or husbands start looking at us or think we cute, then it's like y'all hate us, y'all want to kill all of us alive. Suddenly, y'all think we the worst thing on earth, and y'all literally will do anything to kill every brown person on the face of the planet. All brown women, by the way, because the brown men, for some reason, y'all still think it's okay. And this one brown lady, she had a whole video about it on YouTube, and she said it, and I realized that maybe she's right. But that is, she said that she noticed that some beige ladies have to feel all the time like they better. And if it's anything that happens, and they're only good with us or cool with us if they're being made all the time to feel like somehow they're better. And if something happens to make them feel like they not, then they want to kill all of us. They hate all of us, and they feel like all of us just is complete. You know what I mean? Like we should be just erased from we should be erased from the planet Earth and all that kind of stuff. So maybe she's right about that, you know, and I feel like that's what probably happened there. But either way, what happened to that lady is what it's like to live in North and South Carolina, to be a brown person. It's what it's like, you know. That's literally what it is like. That's what it feels like all the time. Just like a brown lady waking up, everybody waking up the next day, when the light comes, when the sun comes out, the brown lady's dead in the pool, and none of the beige people in the house know what happened. And it's an unsolved mystery, you know, officially. But we all know, everybody in the house knows exactly what happened. So, either way, as I was saying, and now I want to talk to y'all about, but I didn't just come on here to talk to you about witchcraft and what happened to me with witchcraft. I also came here to talk to you about sacred text. Because I interpret sacred text. And so if you all look on my profile, you will notice that what I do is I interpret sacred text. And I've been doing that for like 20 years. So I know a bunch about sacred text, and I interpret all sacred text all over the world in every region. If it's sacred text, I know it's sacred text. If it's not sacred text, then I know it's not sacred text. And I can tell when things are missing. I can tell when people have changed things, that kind of thing. And there are 3 of us in the entirety of the world who do this. If you look in Revelations, you will notice that it says that there are 3 of us, 3 of the Gnostics, and we all interpret sacred text. Now, most people, when they probably read Revelations, they are seeing the satanic interpretation of it. And it's so interesting today because I saw this man talk about who King James is. And he was so shocked that he didn't know who King James was. And he was like, he didn't know who King James was. And he, he was like that. And he's, because he was saying it was a different God than the God that he was used to. And I wanted to say, it's Elohim. So that's the next thing I'm going to tell you about. Okay? When you look in the sacred text, always in the sacred text, when it says Elohim, that word is a plural form of God's. Okay? God's is all over the sacred text. Elohim, Elohim, Elohim. And as a matter of fact, it does not ever, in any of the texts, ever say God. Not one time, not one script. I'm literally telling you, if you were to not bother, honestly, because it shouldn't be a bother. One of the things I was made to understand in my interpretations and as my connections to greater consciousness. And no, I'm not a Satanist. When I say greater consciousness, I mean beings who are not evil. but who are more dimensional. They make sure that I have had an understanding that anything that a person is going to dedicate or say that they're dedicating their life to, or that they are basing their life on, they should research. They should absolutely know what it is and research it. And if you research sacred text, you can't do it without reading Hebrew. Now, Hebrew is star language. Okay? When you read Hebrew, what you are looking at when you look at those Hebrew letters is constellations. If you will notice, if you look at the constellations, all the constellations are the shapes of the Hebrew letters. Did you know that? So that is to tell you, because I always tell people, especially, the stars teach us. So the stars are the ones who teach us. They're the ones who grade us. In order for you to learn anything and evolve, you must evolve by connecting with something that is smarter, that has more knowledge. Human beings don't evolve by connecting with other human beings unless those human beings that they connect to have a connection to beings who are more dimensional and good. Because if they're connected to a being who's more dimensional and evil, evil will not teach, and evil will not evolve anyone. And so it is important to know that evil does not evolve anyone. And I should know, I was attacked by Satanists, I was attacked by witches. So I do know that evil does not evolve anyone for any reason. And that was one of the main things I was taught as I was doing this. Okay, there are beings of the under earth. They are more dimensional beings. Now, what they taught me in the over earth was that the more dimensional beings in the under earth are the beings they don't like. Them the beings they want to get rid of. Because they are the ones who are diseasing those who are more dimensional. And in order for those beings to continue, they pull from the less dimensional in order to continue to cultivate their presence and their ability to live. And that's why when you they talk about low vibrational energy and energy that needs other energy, they don't create anything. They just copy the things that are already created, and then they do like the opposite of those things. That's what they mean by that. So they are low vibrational. They are evil kind of beings. Y'all know what? This shirt is messing with me. I'm probably going to change my shirt. So that's what they're talking about when they say that. Then, like, it's the vibe. It's the vibe this shirt is giving off. I was just going to, like, the store or something, and I was putting this shirt on. And I realized this shirt is giving off that vibe. I'm like, no, I got to change this shirt. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this shirt, and then I'm going to go back. And then I'm going to come back on, and then I'm going to talk about this stuff again. But yeah. Okay, so anyway, but since I did start about it, I'm going to go ahead and finish and talking about it. Since I did start. And then I'll change my shirt, and then I'll start again. But I wonder, how is people able to pause this? I've seen people pause this, and I wonder how I can do it. Oh. Okay, so that's how they did it. Okay, so then I'm going to have to do something to change my shirt. Because I'm telling you, this color is like, I like the hearts, but it's the color and it's the shirt. That's what's messing with me. And I happen to like this shirt, like if I wear it out. But for some reason, like now, it's the vibe. It's the vibe. I don't know. It should seem like it would give off like a better vibe because there's hearts on it. But either way, as I was saying, so either way, when you look in there, it always says, and then this like gets, what I do encounter when I talk to people about these kind of things is they know. So it's not like people don't know. Like you could say to somebody that says Elohim, that is God's, that is not a God. And they will go, oh, I know. And then they will turn right back around and start saying, well, there's only one God. How is that possible? How is that possible that they could literally see in the text that it says Elohim and know that that means God and then still stick to what somebody told them? And I'm going to tell you how. Witchcraft. That's witchcraft. See, the people who told people that that was one God and made people believe in that one God and put Lord all over everything because the fear of a Lord and Master is the beginning of wisdom. They trained people to be enslaved. So all you Christians, y'all don't understand it, but you will. I'm not saying y'all understand it. Some of you probably do by now. Y'all are being trained to be enslaved. And that's how they did it. That's part of how they did it. They made you think that this God was sitting in heaven and he was this absolute tyrant and a complete piece of shit. But you better do everything he says. Because if you don't do what the fuck he say, you going to hell. Or somehow he gonna strike you down. And what's so crazy is people doing evil all over the place. Doing the most atrocious, nasty, evils. And they ain't scared. Do you know why they ain't scared? Because they the ones who taught y'all to be enslaved. They the ones who taught y'all to fear. That it was going to be some God was going to strike you down. They the ones who taught y'all to say Lord and Master all the time. But we didn't teach y'all that. We didn't teach y'all that when we interpreted this text and we wrote this text. That text says Elohim, that says gods. Because you're supposed to be cultivating your Godship. Do you know that in Bereshit it says that the gods rest on the seventh day? Because if you know about alchemy, beings are formed and the being is formed on the sixth day. And the God said, let us make men in our image. And so they were making men in their image. And alchemically 6 is when you will be made in the God image and become the God. And so the gods rest on the seventh day because they don't have to cultivate you into Godship anymore. So now the gods can rest and the man can put love into self and put love into the world because he is now the God. He has now the Godship. So y'all been walking around being trained not to cultivate your Godship, but to worship a Lord and Master. And then some of us are really good and we cultivating that anyway. And do you know it bothers you when you don't have a God leading you? That's why when you see a whole lot of these world leaders and shit, they are so evil. They are such evil, nasty, terrible, perverse individuals. And they do the most terrible things. And they are not cultivating Godship. So it always bothers you to have them leading you because they don't lead you. They're not good stewards of power. And a God is a better steward of power than somebody. Those are fake gods. Those are people who eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? So when you talk about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and I'm going to change this shirt and talk about this again because I'm talking about this shirt is like really, I don't know. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Okay? When you talk about everything in the garden, everything in the garden is good. When it says every tree in the garden is good, it is saying that everything that people want, the fruit in the garden, is good. Those are spiritual trees. All those spiritual trees are good trees. But then it says, but in the midst of the garden, in the midst. So when they reinterpreted the text, they made you feel like it was one tree in the middle of the garden. But nah, that's not the correct interpretation of the text. When it says it's a tree in the midst, when it says in the midst of the garden, it doesn't say there is a tree in the midst of the garden. It said in the midst of the garden. And then it's saying that there is the tree of the knowledge of, there's trees of the knowledge of good and evil, you see. Because what they're saying is in there, on those trees, there are some trees with both good and evil on them. And what that is saying to you when they say that there are trees with both good and evil on them is that some trees, in order to get to the fruit, you can do good or you can do evil. Okay, you can do either one and still get it. So what that says to you, if there's a tree where you can do good and evil, what they're saying to you is don't do evil. Because if you do evil, then you'll die. Now, when they say die, they mean give up the ghost. Okay? Because when people talk about saved, they are talking about reincarnation. They're talking about whether or not you're saved for reincarnation. They ain't talking about saved to go to heaven. There are many heavens. Okay? The Satanists are the ones who told people there's only one heaven and your God is in heaven. No, your God is in heaven, because when you cultivate your Godship, cultivating Godship is where your heaven is going to be. Because heavens are happinesses. So what happens is there are good and there are evil happinesses. Ooh, I'm going to change this shirt. Hold on, I might need to light. Yes, I think that is so much better. Right. Okay, so back to what I was saying. Okay, so tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then too, like, part of me want to also talk about some of the things that have to do, some of this stuff gonna have to do with witchcraft, because when you're talking about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, okay, that's what I was at. Okay, so that means you could do either good or evil to get to that fruit on the tree. So if you can do good or evil to get to the fruit on that tree, it's saying if you do evil, if you now know the knowledge of both good and evil, because see, that's what they're talking about. They're not saying know who's good and who's evil. No, that's the satanic interpretation. That's what they lied to you and told you. What they're saying is now you know both. That's why it says both good and evil. So you got to know how to interpretate that alchemy. Because you're only supposed to know good. You're only supposed to know what it's like to do good, to get to the fruit on those trees. But now if you know how to do both good and evil to get to those fruit on those trees, then they say you'll surely die. You see? And then when it says the serpent talked to the female, it's telling her, no, you won't surely die. You understand? It doesn't say, oh, you ain't gonna die. He says, no, you won't surely die. Because it's important to know that interpretations is he's saying, no, it's not a guarantee you're gonna die. And then when he says it's not a guarantee you're gonna die, what he says is, the gods, the Elohim, know that then you'll be like them, knowing both good and evil. And then it says something like that. Wait, I know that it says that. That's not what I'm saying something like that for. There's another part of that script that I need to remember right now. It says you'll be alike. That's what it says. It says the Elohim knows that you will be not a Elohim, okay? Because you have to realize that you're cultivating Godship. So you're not going to be a God. You're going to be like a false God. Because when that script says that, it doesn't say you're going to be like a God, knowing good and evil. And that's the false interpretation, okay? It doesn't say you're going to be a God. And so they misinterpreted it because English is a language that interprets the way that it does because it is an influence of the evil who interprets it in English like that. And who cultivated English the way that it is. It does not say you'll be as an Elohim, knowing both good and evil. That's a misinterpretation. Okay? What it says is you will be you will be, I want to say, because it's like a false God. Because a false God would know good and evil. It's not to say you're going to be a God. You know, once you start to know evil, you can't really cultivate Godship anymore. And so that's why the important part of that script is when he turns to the evil. When the Elohim becomes walking through the garden, if you'll notice, the Elohim turns to the evil. And he tells the evil he gonna crawl along the ground. You see? He said you're gonna crawl along the ground. And he said to that evil that, you know, they were ashamed and they were given animal skins. You see where I'm going? So if you're a God, if you become a God, okay, it's like you're not going to crawl along the ground and then get animal skins. Because that's not what a God does. You see where I'm going? The God comes walking through the garden. So if you say that the person becomes a God, which is what the evil interpreted it to y'all to say, that the person becomes a God. No, the person doesn't become a God. The person is a false God. And that false God gets animal skin. And then it tells that false God they're going to crawl along the ground. Now, the importance of knowing about modes of navigation of sacred text. Let me see if I'm turned up. Okay. Sacred text, there are modes of navigations. Those modes of navigation are different. Walking, crawling, running, dancing, all of that is part of modes of navigation. That is those, and swimming, okay? Rowing when you're in a boat. Those are the ways that you navigate life. And so if you're crawling, you're struggling. If you're running, you having a, you flowing through the society, through the environment. Okay? If you are walking, that means you're walking along and you're not having a hard time. So when he tells them false gods, they gonna crawl, he's saying that those who are cultivating good are gonna make them crawl because they false gods. But when you go into sacred texts in a bunch of different places, you see where the evil has begun to walk, have begun to do different other things. And if you go into different alchemical stories, it tells you alchemical stories of the evil who are dancing like no one could ever dance. For instance, if you look at Job, is a one who he asked the Satan, the adversary. Now we know the adversary is evil because in the beginning of Job it says Job is an innocent man, knowing good, knowing righteousness. And then it says Satan on some versions, and it says the adversary on the other versions. Now when it says the Hasatan, that's the accuser. The reason why it's called the accuser is because an accuser doesn't know what is true and what isn't. So an accuser who moves on something that they don't know is true or on an accusation is a liar because they're moving on something that they don't know is true. And it calls it the adversary because it is the adversary of the innocent, the one who is guilty, the one who is evil. So he asked him, where is he? He says he's walking to and fro upon the earth. The importance of saying that he's walking is to say that the adversary, the evil, is not struggling, it's not crawling, it's not having a hard time. So when he says the evil is not having a hard time, that is to say, that's a particular script that doesn't only mean that the devil is on the earth or the evil is on the earth. It means that not only is evil on the earth, but evil is flowing on the earth. They are having a good time. You see what I'm saying? And do you notice that when you look in Job, when it goes along with the story, Job starts to crawl. You also notice in Enoch. Enoch means it says discipline. Discipline is the same as disciple. Jesus is telling you that those disciplines are the ones that you will that will give you everlasting life. You see what I'm saying? And the reason why Jesus gets killed is because those disciplines are not being honored. They are not being done. So, okay. But like I said, Job, when he asked the Hasatan or the adversary, where he been, he said he's walking to and from the earth because he said, oh yeah. And the significance of Job that I was going to tell you is that Job was crawling through houses of fire. Okay, so when Job went through what he was going through, he was crawling through houses of fire. Now, Job is an upright man. He's a good person. Everybody, when they read Job, they see that Job is a very good person. And when you go through the Job story, what happens to Job is he gets taken up. Now, the reason Job gets taken up is because Job levels up. If you know alchemy, and I do know alchemy, that is what that is saying. They are saying that he goes to a higher level of being. Not that he goes to heaven and gets taken up to heaven with the God that you all are believing in. No, that's not real. But Job becomes a higher level of being. Alchemically, he is taken up to a higher level. So that's what happens with Job. And Job does that after he sometimes is crawling through houses of fire. See, so that's modes of navigation in the sacred text. To crawl, to walk, to run. So what it's telling you, and especially because Job is dealing with accusations, Job is dealing with houses of fire. Fire you can relate to, say, the dragon in Revelation. A dragon spits fire. Okay? When the devil is when the devil is walking, when the devil is running, the good people are crawling. So that's a theme that you will see once you understand the alchemy of the sacred text. That whenever you see the devil walking, whenever you see the devil running, you're going to see the good crawling. You're going to see the good in a struggle. And that's what you see when you walk around the world today. The devil is absolutely running. And the devil is walking, the devil is running, because the devil not having a hard time. The devil's living in luxuries. Because the devil living in luxuries, you see a bunch of the good people is crawling. The good people is going through houses of fire. They having a hard time. You know what I mean? It's hard for them to deal with it. They barely paying their bills, some of those people, even though they working. And they don't even know that they not even supposed to support a system like that. If you really was understanding alchemy and greater consciousness, then you would know you were not ever supposed to support a system that does not allow you to evolve. And evolve don't have anything to do with money. Your evolution is supposed to be your spirit supposed to evolve. But people so busy crawling, some of those people, trying to take care of what is basic life needs. Food, water, that kind of thing. And the people, the false gods, the fake gods, who are presidents of governments and that kind of shit, but who are now going around calling themselves gods, okay? And I will tell you, I've seen a bunch of them recently call themselves gods. Them not gods. Them and some fake ass gods. But yeah, whenever the evil is running, whenever the evil is walking, the good is crawling. The good is having the hardest time. And right now, you're at a time when you look around, the people are worshiping their oppressors. Now, when you tell people that, they wouldn't want to believe that, because you got so many of these brown people that believe that when they plugged in to participate with the system that was harming them and unaliving them. These TikTok streets. Gotta watch my words. That is unaliving them and doing atrocious things and having them to crawl for their basic needs. They are not in the standing that is to support what is not. They're literally giving evil what it gets, what motivates evil to do evil to them. And they worship in their oppressors. Because when you worship your oppressors, that's what you're giving evil. You're giving evil what it's getting in order to oppress you. If it can get your worship, if it can get your obedience, if it can get luxuries out of oppressing you, if you could facilitate their lives and their survival and their luxuries rather than your own, that's what evil is wanting. It wants to do extreme evil to you and still live in luxuries. So in order to stop oppression, the only way, and I'm saying the only way out of oppression, is to stop giving the oppressor what it's getting to oppress you. That is the only way you're going to get out of oppression. You're either going to have to unalive the oppressor, or you're going to have to stop giving the oppressor what it gets to oppress you. Whatever is motivating the oppressor to oppress you, you got to stop that. You got to stop giving it to him. So once you cut that, then the oppressor, they're not getting what they get to do it anymore. They don't have a reason to do it anymore. Yeah. So, as I was saying, in the Bereshit. So we were in Bereshit when I was talking about this. So in Bereshit, that's what they're talking about. So when the Elohim, when it says the Elohim comes calling in the garden, okay? When the Elohim comes calling, when something calls, in alchemic sacred text, because all sacred text is alchemic equations. When it's calling, that means that it is cultivating. Okay, to call something, to recite is, okay, so an angel is a recital. Okay, when y'all look at recital, when y'all look at the Quran, Quran is recital. To recite is the way your whole, is your arm, leg, arm, head. Recital to greater consciousness. Now, what that is to say is every single thing you do, all your behaviors, is how you recite to greater consciousness, is how you speak to greater consciousness. Okay, because when there's a being who's more dimensional, for instance, some of y'all believe in a God. When that God is looking at you, they can see every single part of you. They can see you more dimensionally. So that God is not worried about your words only. If there is a God, that God is then worried about, that God is then looking, when it looks at you, at every single solitary thing that you do. And that every single solitary thing that you do is the way you speak to him. That's your recital to him. You see? So a recital is your Quran. Now, when you call, in order to call something, if you have a recital and that's your whole being calling, because that's how alchemy reads. When it says call, when it says recite, it's your whole being speaking. So when you call to that being, that means that you are trying to get a connection to that being. You know, you're cultivating a connection to that being. So when it says, when the Elohim is walking through the garden and comes a calling, that is to say that those people who ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, those who know evil, are now getting a call from what they would cultivate as their Godship. That's what's calling them. What they cultivating is then calling them. So once it starts to call them, what do? They looking around and they ashamed. Now they ashamed. Why are they ashamed? Because they know evil, because they done evil. And they recital to that Godship. Now they know evil instead of it being all good. And see, now that Godship is in the garden calling. So once they're ashamed, what do? They cover themselves. The reason why they cover themselves once they feel ashamed is because they know evil now. They've done evil. So now they're trying to cover it up. They're trying to lie. You understand now? When the God comes calling, they cover up because they're ashamed, because they lying. But because the Godship can see they recital and that they lying, he says, he turned to them, he give them animal skins. Now, when they say animal skins, that's a reference. Animal skins has a few references. First of all, the first reference is reincarnation. Because once they start doing evil, they can't reincarnate into this human form anymore. Like that. So, when reincarnation is done, a person can reincarnate into animal form. Okay? The second reference is when people do evil, they often turn into animals. And the third reference is that the stars, the planets, they all evolve us, and other more dimensional beings evolve us. We evolve animals. So now they have a remedial cultivation of their Godship. An animal cultivation, which they gonna have. Because them people be eating raw meat, they be cannibals, they be all kind of stuff, trying to do that stuff. And it's a remedial cultivation of Godship. They can no longer cultivate Godship in human form, in a human way anymore, in that more advanced way. Now, they real evil. So they'll tell you some shit like, well, they got a mansion, they got a this, they got a that. But I'm going to tell you something about that because I do this. I don't do evil, but I do sacred text. I do connections with greater consciousness. I am over earth. Remember, there's over earth and under earth. Okay, the under earth will tell you some lies. Okay, but there's an over earth and an under earth. And I am over earth. Now, when they do, what they'll tell you, when they manifest those things, those mansions and all of that, I want you to realize that when you look back, way back in other eras of time, when we made pyramids, because those pyramids are ours, we made those. That is an alchemic equation. The Giza complex is an alchemic equation. Okay? When you look at those temples, the way they were so elaborately made, and they were made alchemically. When we knew where the stars were aligned and we were aligning things according to the Orion's belt, that's because the Orion's belt, those stars teach us. Stars are living beings. Those are living, conscious, gorgeous beings. And they speak dimensionally. So when they speak to everybody, they speak to everybody. They can speak to beings here, Jupiter, everywhere, and each other. Because that's how they speak. Now, those things, we knew how to do those things back then. And we did them in such a more elaborate, gorgeous way than the way things are done now. And see, what the evil does, it takes a lot of shortcuts by doing evil. But what y'all don't understand is, you looking at it like, oh, you got a cell phone, you're more advanced. But you don't need a cell phone if you can project. You see where I'm going? Especially like when those evils do the things they do. They do it in they take the shortcut. And when they astral project, they do evil in order to do those things. Those are things that human beings are supposed to be able to do already. But when they do them in an evil way, they agree to do very evil things in order to do those things. So when they're doing those evil to do those things, you look at them and you see those buildings that they made. Now you'll notice if you look at Washington, look at the monument in Washington where they made the, what is that thing called? That big tall, they got a whole bunch of them in Egypt made out of solid stone. But in Washington, they make it out of bricks. You see, that's what they telling you in your face. They can't do what we did in Kemet. They can't do it. They got to build the same thing out of bricks that we built with solid stone. They got to build the same thing out of pieces that we built with solid stone. We were moving 200-ton blocks or more. They can't do that kind of thing. And they can't build with those positions. They couldn't make a Giza complex. Right now today, the most evil scientist, the most evil magician cannot build the Giza complex. They can't even decipher the Giza complex. You see? They got to move in a more remedial form of God. They can't cultivate the Godship like we did it. So they would have you think that the things that they manifested are ahead when they're really behind. And then they start telling you things like the aliens built the Giza complex. In the meantime, I can decipher the Giza complex. But see, when they were astral projecting on me, they were astral projecting in a way where they were like raping me for knowledge. They wanted the knowledge to be put out there, but they wanted to act like they were responsible. But the thing is, they had me not to decipher the Giza complex because they didn't want them to steal that from me. And because that's a key to a whole bunch of things that we were doing in Egypt. Well, in Kemet, because it was always Kemet. We only called it Egypt when it was dread. Who's on here? I thought I saw an owl up there, and I was just going to talk about that owl song. When the person's saying her coochie comes out late at night. Because, I mean, I turned that on, and that's the first thing I saw yesterday. And I'm going to tell you, I don't watch so many of them videos. Because as soon as I saw that owl, the first one that I saw when I turned on was the lady with the owl underwear and the shirt with the collar on the other side. And she was like dancing in the woods. It looked like it was in the woods or something. On the side of the road. And I mean, I looked at so many of them videos after that. But I don't usually watch that stuff. You know, the only reason why I watched it is because that song went mainstream. But anyway, as I was saying when I was talking about this. Yeah, so they can only cultivate in a more remedial form. So the way they fool you is is with the way that they're cultivating. What they do is they stop you from cultivating your Godship. And they tell you that the way that they're cultivating their Godship is the only way. Because see, if they could stop you, if they could stifle and burden you and curse you into not having a home, and then build a home, and stifle whether or not you have materials and whether or not you have what you need to build what you need, then they can make you think they more advanced. Because the way the evil do it. And let me tell you what was so interesting to me as I was learning about these things about witchcraft, okay? What was interesting to me was when I was being told that witchcraft is not a means to an end. Did y'all may not understand that, but I'm about to explain it to you. Witchcraft is not a means to an end. It is not something that a person started doing because they were told by other beings that that's how you get things. The beginning of that is somebody already wanted to fuck animals. They already wanted to do that. They were already perverse. You know, when people do witchcraft, they do a lot of things to children. Somebody already wanted to do that. So the way that started is the original people who were doing that already had something going on with them. And then when they did it, they were then given evil rewards for that if they continued to do it. So it's not the other way around. It's not a means to an end. It's an end to a means. Because people die, you know, they will give up the ghost doing witchcraft, doing a bunch of that stuff that they do nowadays. Because a lot of them, when they do it, they don't feel it, you know, they don't act like they feel ashamed. They'll do the worst, most atrocious stuff and act like they don't feel ashamed. And the crazy part about it is one of the reasons why they don't is because them witchcraft families been cultivating them evil, you know, I was going to say assholes. Oh, look, I said it. But aeon for a long time, for centuries. So they've been cultivating people who are dead. You know what I mean? When somebody is dead, they can't sympathize with you. A person who don't have an immortal soul, who don't have a living soul, cannot sympathize with the living. So see, this is why I just saw this too, because I saw this lady ask the question, why people keep looking at brown people like they not living and all this kind of stuff. Well, that's because the people who look at brown people like they're not living don't have living souls. See, I asked greater consciousness this question and they answered me. What happens is if a person don't have a living soul, they can't look at you like a living being. They can't empathize with you. So those beige people who do the evils, and really it's not only beige people, those beige and brown people who do the evils. The reason why they're able to be absolutely ruthless is because they cannot empathize with a person who is living. And they cannot, if they don't have living souls, if they're not living themselves. And see, this is something they also was telling me before. Hold on. Okay, a person got to have a living soul to see a living being. So when they looking at you and they're not seeing that you have the same fingers, the same toes, same kind of fingers, same kind of toes, same space where the eyes go, and a head and two arms and two legs, and then too, what they also said was somebody who, first of all, they were saying somebody who can't see you is living don't attribute living things to you. So they don't feel like you need things that living beings need if they're not living. I mean, if they don't see you as living. And they can't see you as living and empathize with you as a living if they're not living. You see? Which makes sense. If a dead body is in the room, the dead body don't give up who else is in the room. It's going to stink. So the dead body's not going to not stink in the room because other people is in it and they got to smell that smell. So the dead can't empathize. The dead cannot empathize. And so people who don't have empathy like that, people who don't attribute living things and feel like living people have need living things, which the evils don't. If you'll notice people who do evil, what they do. They keep you cultivating their luxuries while they don't give you things that living people need. They hardly do that for you. And they don't attribute what they feel like they need to live and feel comfortable. They don't attribute that to you. Because a dead being cannot sympathize with the living. That's why it's two sides of the Baron. The Baron got the one side where he eliminates what is obsolete. Those things he'll kill off. That's a part of what they worship in when you go to like Mexico and they worship in the dead being. Part of that is because that part of that being takes out what's obsolete. But then there's the other part. And that other part is the one who kills prematurely, the one that'll kill anything, the one that doesn't care about anything but to kill it. Because it kills. It is the dead thing. So the reason why you see so many of them, like they don't empathize, they don't care, because when alchemy is alchemy, a person, all children are the alchemic equation of their parents. They're the outcome of the alchemic equation when their parents' alchemy is combined. So the alchemy of children is whoever that person is combining with, that's the outcome of their alchemy plus the other person's alchemy. That's what the recital is, too. It's part of your recital is your alchemy. Part of your recital is what the greater consciousness sees is what comes out. Now, a bunch of people are very much mistaken when they talk about evolution. And they feel like evolution comes when they are gaining material things within a society. But a recital encompasses everything that a person is. Whether they good, whether they bad, whether they cancerous to the environment, whoever they are, is a part of the recital. You understand? So if you are reciting in the environment and you gain a lot of material things, but you do it as a dead being, your recital to greater consciousness is a dead being. But if you don't have a lot of material things, but you are a living being and you're a compassionate being, then your recital to the greater consciousness is that you're a living being. So a lot of people get that confused because they think life progress has to do with accumulating the manifestations of those who are dead. Because if you look around in society, what people have manifested within these societies are manifested from those who are dead, those who don't sympathize with the living. So if you're manifesting a whole lot of things that the dead has manifested, then your recital to the greater consciousness is going to be that you have accumulated a whole lot of things that the dead has manifested. See, that's alchemy. Now, when it comes to being saved, okay, a lot of Christians think being saved has something to do with whether or not someone can kill you. No, being saved has, and when it does because it has something to do with whether or not you reincarnate. Because somebody will be saved for reincarnation. Okay? But being saved for reincarnation is reincarnation. I don't know if a person can hear me. When I was on here earlier, I could be heard. Now I don't know if I'm speaking and if I could be heard or not be heard. But that's what is so important about your recital. And to know what the recital is, because a whole lot of people be thinking the recital is about speaking. It is about speaking, but they think it's just about speaking with their mouths. It's your recital to greater consciousness that becomes extremely important, especially when it comes to being saved, when it comes to reincarnation. Because if your recital is one who is dead, they have no reason to reincarnate the dead. It's a dead being that's having a dead body in the room. That's going to stink up the place. You see? All right, y'all. So as I said, the reason why they look at each other and they're ashamed, okay, and I said they get animal skins, right? So that animal skins, those are your three references, okay? Reincarnation, excuse me, reincarnation, transformation, and remedial cultivations. And then they talk about being kicked out of the garden, okay? And then they talk about will you have... and should I talk about this? Should I end the live now? I'm thinking because these I haven't... I've deciphered these, but I didn't... The things that I'm talking about right now is those things that I posted. So let me see what I posted. Oh yeah. So then remember, when you see in Bereshit or Genesis, y'all call it Genesis, when he said, let there be light. Okay, so those of you who talk about the Elohim as God, and I don't know why y'all do that. Y'all supposed to be smart enough to know that when an evil person tells you something, you're supposed to question everything. And you ain't supposed to automatically believe that. When you see Elohim, you're supposed to know that that's God's. Now, when it says the Elohim says, let there be light, you notice there's no sun and moon. And the sun and moon doesn't come around till later on. And then it says the sun to rule the day and the moon to rule the night. That's because when we think of night and day, we think of evil and good. Okay? The night being the evil, the day being the good. So that's why they say the sun, Ra, is the one who cures the evil, who takes out the evil. And then you have the night, the evil. They do a whole lot of things by the moon. And yeah, they're going to do a whole bunch of things by the moon because they are usually doing their conjuring at night. And they're very occultic. You see? So yeah, the lot of things that people do when they're conjuring, it goes by phases of the moon and goes by what is happening at night. A lot of things that are done during the day has something to do with sun, when the sun is up, the phases of the sun, that kind of thing. Okay? Now, that brings me to this. When you were talking about sun worship, I absolutely worship the stars. I worship the sun. And when you see Abraham, you see people whose father is the sun because that is father, son, the people. Because it means people whose father is the sun. We are good people. So when those good people build a nation, those good people build Kemet. Kemet becomes Egypt when witches move in, when it has capitalism, when people are unhappy. And I heard people talking about this today on here. But they didn't know what a lot of these things were saying. When you notice in Shemot, but y'all call it Exodus, it's not supposed to be. The people are unhappy with their progress in life, and those are not slaves. When it talks about Hebrews, they're not talking about slaves. And it says the people are overworked. Now, the people are overworked because one, they are beholden to the nation. And I mean, not beholding, they are working both for the nation and for themselves. And so their evolution is already becoming different because they are also contributing to something else. But the other reason is because if you will look in the chapter and you know what the alchemy means, it is saying that the witches start to move in. So what happens is people start doing evil witchcraft and people start serving capitalism. If you know the alchemy, that's what Shema says. So after they start doing that, people don't like it. Their life progress is not good, any of that. So what happens is they put the witches out. They have a bunch of things that happen, and then at some point they put them witches out and they part the Red Sea. See, when they start to say they don't like this, and they start to go against what's happening, they part the Red Sea. Alchemically, red is consistency. Seeds are the society, so that's what's already consistent in the society. So when they part the Red Sea, you'll notice there's two camps, it says in Shema. One camp on one side, one camp on the other. That's the ones who want things to keep going the way it's going because they doing the evil and they doing the capitalism shit. And then there's the other ones who's like, no, we want to do something else. Now, before they do that, Moshe is drawn out of the water. The water is the seas. The water is the flow of the people. Moshe are the revolutionaries. So the revolutionaries are drawn out of the water. And then they are nursed by their mother and they are shaped by Batia. Batia is the Pharaoh's daughter. So when you have the Pharaoh's daughter, the Pharaoh is what the nation's God. The gods of the nation are really the God of the nation. It's what's called the Pharaoh. The king is the chosen God of the nation. The Pharaoh is what the nation itself is established for. So the king and the Pharaoh are two different beings. The king is a person, a chosen God. The Pharaoh is the nationhood. So the nationhood is going to shape people who are drawn out of the water. There we're going to raise the people drawn out of the water because that's what all the people want. Okay? Moshe goes into the wilderness, goes into the bush. When they say the bush, that means that those people are looking around at the people who are not a part of the nationhood. And the ones drawn out of the water, the revolutionaries, are told to take off their sandals, take off their shoes. They standing on holy ground. Now, what that is saying, when they take off their shoes and they standing on holy ground, is that shoes is talking about where you're going. Anything that has to do with your feet in sacred text talk about where you are going. So if they take off their shoes, that means whatever you were doing, one is not of yourself because you got shoes on, it's not your actual feet. Like when people see each other naked, they see what each other are made of. Nakedness in sacred text is what you're made of. What a person is made of, the being is made of. So taking off their shoes mean they were wearing somebody else's, whatever somebody else is made of. And they are told to take those off. And then when they say they standing on holy ground and they finna go in a different direction because that's what he's saying, that Moshe is about to do that thing. They about to act like the people who's acting in the bush and they about to worship Yahweh. Okay? The original gods. The reason why they call Yahweh the original gods is because Yahweh is Elohim, I was, I am, I will be. That's revolution. So in the beginning, they were worshiping revolution. They were doing what they needed to do to evolve. Not revolution, evolution. They were doing what they need to do to evolve. So that was the revolutionary saying they want to evolve. So when they take off their feet, they're standing on holy ground and they want to worship Yahweh. They want to evolve. Because they understood that the nation wasn't evolving. They were doing capitalism. They were doing witchcraft. They say it in Shemot. If you read the sacred text, you'll see they say it in Shabbat, especially if you know alchemy. Those are the witchcraft. They didn't want that because witchcraft is not evolving. Because remember what I told you. What they could do then, they're not doing now. You see? They're doing a whole different thing. And then a whole bunch of people is doing a bunch of stuff through witchcraft, through evil, that they would be doing by cultivating Godships that they're not cultivating because they got their cultivate in that remedial form. So instead of people walking around cultivating their own Godship, they giving luxuries to the most vile, perverse, evil dummies on earth. And that's why that he had to take off his sandals, because when that witchcraft moved in and took over, they wasn't doing the things that they would do to cultivate their Godships. Now, when they do that, one thing that, too, I wanted to say, because earlier today, and really for the last couple of days, and when I was talking about, like, being in school, one of the reasons why I noticed that when I was younger, I was really upset by not being able to do certain things that people do in school. And I was having such a hard time in school where it got to a point to where I was hardly um, like even attending sometime. And I was having problems because I was going to colleges and I was having a hard time when I was going to college, but it was very easy work. So my teachers would know and the professors would know and they would talk to me because the work was easy for me. It was very easy for me to be in those schools and do the work and keep up with class and all of those things. But I was having such a hard time getting to school, being in class, and then I was being attacked with witchcraft. So what they do is they make people get these pieces of paper. And ooh, y'all ought to see the way the over earth look at them pieces of paper. Because to the over earth, those pieces of paper don't mean nothing. They don't mean anything. And so what they kept reiterating to me is that them pieces of paper ain't nothing. And that people are basing what knowledge they have on a piece of paper, and they shouldn't do that. Because realistically, when you think about that, that's the way they usurped knowledge and raped knowledge from those people who really had knowledge. Because what happens is, for instance, if you look at the medical industry, they were going out into the bush and they were getting the knowledge about all those herbs and those surgeries and ways to cure from people in the bush. People who had never gone to school, people who had never gotten a piece of paper. And then what happened was they were putting their names on it, and then they were taking it to those medical schools and putting their names on procedures, and then telling people that that was something that they made up, and then giving people pieces of paper on whether or not they could perform those. But if you in the bush and you get sick, the people who help you or cure you, they never got a piece of paper. You see what I'm saying? And then the people who were at Oxford, when they know all the things that they could know at Oxford in their field, you know what they do after that? When they think they know everything that they could learn at Oxford, then they go back out to the bush and try to get some more information. They try to get some more knowledge out of those people in the bush. So if you really notice that when you see those people graduating from Harvard, graduating from Oxford, graduating from a bunch of those colleges, when they feel like they know everything that they can gain from those colleges, all the knowledge in those colleges, they go to the bush and they go live with the bush people to try to figure out if there are any more procedures, if there are any more herbs, if there are any more whatever it is that they can do, that they can put their name on, and then take it back and teach it at those schools, or implement those things in those hospitals, or whatever it is that they're doing, you see? So what they were telling me the whole time is that those pieces of paper don't actually have any kind of, there's nothing to it. They aren't anything. They're only pieces of paper, and that a bunch of that knowledge is not coming from those people who have those papers. A bunch of that knowledge is coming from people who ain't ever had them pieces of paper. And so I was told that, most of that time when I was really like upset and being attacked by witchcraft and that kind of thing and having problems attending class, not to pay attention to that because I'm an alchemist Gnostic, and they were telling me that I know what I know, but those people with pieces of paper don't know what I know. And they can't know what I know unless I teach them, or unless one of the other Gnostic alchemists teach them. But I can always know what they know. And school was very easy for me, so I really could easily absorb or adapt or learn what it is that they knew. And so when I went through being attacked by witchcraft, it was a bunch of accusations, okay? Those accusations are the fire. Remember, Enoch went through houses of fire, and sometimes he had to crawl through. So that became very significant to me as I was being abused and bullied and that kind of thing. a suffering with SRA was that Enoch went through houses of fire, and sometimes he crawled through those houses of fire because the houses of fire was actually being attacked. And so when you read Enoch, what happens is in the beginning of Enoch, you read where people make a deal with Azazel. If you know what Azazel means that Azazel is when somebody knows what something is before they do it. When somebody already knows that the act is evil before they do it, that's an agreement with Azazel. Okay? When somebody is doing witchcraft, they cannot do witchcraft unless they know the act is evil. They have to know, or it won't get done. So anybody, and it says, that's why it makes sure that it's said in that book that about Azazel, because in order to do witchcraft, one must make a deal with Azazel. And then once those people make a deal with Azazel, if you notice that the deal is made, and then Enoch is dealing with those angels who make that deal. And as he is viewing what it is that they're doing there, he is traversing through houses of fire. Okay? Fire is when things are moving around so much and they creating friction from bouncing around, hitting each other, hitting other things. And it's creating friction and heat, and anybody that cannot handle that, anything that can't handle it gets destroyed. Okay, spiritual fire is the same thing as physical fire, except spiritual fire is spiritual. Okay, things get destroyed. So when Enoch has to experience that spiritual fire, sometimes he has to crawl through, because that was a hard thing to experience. And you notice they start off with Azazel because they're saying that somebody is projecting spiritual fire at Enoch. And Enoch is traversing through those things. Okay, Enoch is discipline. So that means discipline is traversing through those things, and sometimes they have to crawl through. Crawling is that mode of navigation I was talking to you about. Different modes of navigation in sacred text. And those different modes of navigation, when somebody is crawling, is a struggle. Walking, they have ease of movement. Running is when they having like a really great ease of movement, and they fast. When it's actually, there also goes into birdship. When somebody is flying, when it talks about birds, they're talking about heavens. Anytime the sacred text is talking about a reference to birds, birds get far and wide very easily and very quickly. Okay? And then birds are up to do of heavens a bunch of the time when they're referenced in sacred text. So as I said, Enoch was going through those houses of fire. And you notice that at the end of Enoch traversing through those houses of fire, he levels up. Okay? And that's what Enoch is dealing with, is those kinds of attacks. Those kinds of attacks from those who create fires. Create things that are so terrible, create so much friction and so much heat that it will tear up anything that cannot handle it. And those who do that are witches. Witches make those covenants. Witches make those agreements with Azazel. They know it's sinister before they do it. Okay? When they do that, they create houses of fire. A house is like a kingdom. It's like everything is under that umbrella, is what it's saying by house in sacred text. So going into that house of fire would be something like, for instance, what I experienced, okay? All the time that I was being told that by greater consciousness, don't worry about a degree, don't worry about a diploma, don't worry about this and that because I'm very smart, I understand who I am, those kinds of things. I was going through houses of fire at some point because the witches who were attacking me were saying things like, well, you don't have this, you don't have that. How can anybody believe you could do this and this and that? But I can do what I do. I am honestly the Horemaket. I'm the person who can perceive, interpret. I'm the person who I can perceive and interpret all sacred texts, but I can perceive and interpret all alchemy. I'm the person who is connected to the beings who speak lightning. They're the ones who teach me. So they're like, don't worry about that. I know what I know, and they're teaching me what they're teaching me, and they chose me. And so what they tell me is they chose me. Okay, so can't nobody unchoose me. Can't nobody who is not as dimensional as them, who is not as them or more conscious than them, less conscious than them, unchoose me. And they can't unchoose me with a piece of paper. You know, whether I have a piece of paper or don't have a piece of paper, does not, is not the qualifier, it's not the validator of my qualifications, whether I have a piece of paper or don't have a piece of paper. So I was made to understand how important it was that I had an understanding of that. Because I don't, them giving me a piece of paper don't tell me whether or not I'm smart. And then too, what they also made sure that I had an understanding of is who manifested those institutions. Because remember, I was telling you about the way they manifest. Those institutions that they manifest are manifested by those who do evil. So a bunch of the people who are able to get into those institutions have a whole bunch to do with whether or not those people have a flow with evil or don't have a flow with evil. A bunch of what they are speaking in those institutions as they are learning those things that are manifested in those institutions have to do with what evil want people to learn. Now, I'm not saying that every single thing in those institutions is something that a person can't use or is absolutely evil, but I am saying that a bunch of what they call knowledge that is not knowledge. A bunch of that information that they're projecting and having people to speak and recite in those institutions are something of evil. And it's something that's not correct knowledge. And so, some of it is knowledge. And a bunch of that knowledge is coming out of the bush. But some of it is not knowledge, okay? And a person's ability to perceive and then recite both is how they get those pieces of paper. So some of that isn't knowledge. So they're saying, don't put too much into whether or not I can get a piece of paper from them. And then two, I shouldn't care about getting a piece of paper from an institution who was manifested of evil. And a bunch of the people who manifested those institutions are evil people. Okay, now what was I in Bereshit or Genesis? Or am I still talking about Bereshit or Genesis? Because I done started talking about a whole lot of other things. And another thing, okay, one of the things I put on my post talks about Job, because it's very important for you all to understand that when you talk about Job, when because I mentioned this too, when those things are lining up for Yahweh, and they say, well, the devil was there, so the devil was in heaven. That is not real. That is not real. Now, it is real that those things that Job produced lines up for Yahweh, because Yahweh is evolution. So what's happening is Yahweh, Job is getting ready to evolve. But he can't evolve. And you know why he can't evolve? Because the Hasatan, the liar, is in line. Is also in line. The enemy. So when you read the sacred text, if you read the King James Version, that's a satanic version. But if you read the Alchemy version, not the Hebrew version, then what you'll find out is what actually happens is when the Hasatan is asked, what are you doing here? He says he was walking to and from the earth, which means that he is easily navigating the earth. He's having ease of movement. So when he's having ease of movement, Yahweh say, Job is not going to worship the face of you. He ain't gonna be showing the face of you. Because that's Yahweh, that's evolution, telling the Hasatan, you can't evolve. And Job gonna evolve. So what happens is the Yahweh tells that Hasatan, take your hand off Job. See, people look at that because they don't know the true interpretation of it, but I'm literally saying, if you go read the Hebrew interpretation, it literally says different. So you don't even have to be like, well, it's because the alchemical, this and that. It literally says in the Hebrew that Yahweh tells the devil, Yahweh tells Satan, Yahweh tells the adversary, take his hand off of Job. So, if you don't, you got to read the Hebrew version, because the Hebrew version is the honest version, is the more truer version. So what happens is, he tells that evil, take their hand off of Job. And that is how Job started having a hard time. Because see, you have to realize the evil is having, and that is how Job started having a hard time. Because see, you have to realize the evil is having beginning. When the evil has ease of movement, the good starts to crawl. So that's what was happening in Job. Evil was getting ease of movement. And when evil had ease of movement, the good started to crawl. And then after that, Job was having a hard time. So that's always the principle, though. When you have a society, any society, where evil is walking, where evil is running, where evil is up, that means they're going to put good down. Good going to start crawling then. Okay? But when the gods, when the Elohim is walking through the garden, okay, the Elohim is the one who tells the evil that the evil going to crawl. All right, so I'm going to let my phone charge up, because really I'm using my phone for this. And so I'm going to have my phone charged if I'm going to continue to use it. So everybody who heard anything, I see like at least one person is there. I'm glad to see that somebody was listening. But I'm going to continue this later on. I usually am on like really late at night when I usually do these kinds of things. And I'm in the middle of something. So I'm going to see, anybody who's listening or anybody who wants to know more, I'll see you later, probably a little later on, a few hours from now, or in the middle of the night, because it's usually somewhere around 3 o'clock that I would be on here. In my time, because I'm in the United States. So if y'all are in like Africa or somewhere, it's going to be like 3 o'clock in the day. And I'll see everyone later.